So let's talk about that other thing that happened in Texas yesterday. The Supreme Court not taking any action earlier today on a request to block that Texas law that prohibits most abortions there after 6 weeks. That amounts to an almost nearly complete ban because most women don't even know they are pregnant at 6 weeks. And my question to you is this. Your constituents, if they look at you and say you couldn't fix voting, what makes them think that you're going to be able to get something done with regards to abortion?
Well, it's really unfortunate. I was one of the people who advocated very strongly in protecting a woman's right to choose. Republicans in Texas are more concerned about blocking people from wearing masks and vaccine mandates than they are a woman's right to choose. They want to take away a woman's ability to decide what's best for her body. As you said, essentially banning abortion. 6 weeks, most women don't even know that they're pregnant. They also instituted a cause of action where you could literally sue the doctor, a person who provided a ride to someone to get the abortion, a counselor, a faith-based person, anybody associated with the abortion could be sued up to $10,000 plus attorney's fees. This is a chilling a piece of legislation that we believe is unconstitutional, but we have a Supreme Court that would not even hear it. So this is an assault on Roe versus Wade, and people should wake up and understand the magnitude of these Supreme Court appointees and the fact that Obama's was blocked from appointing his appointee on the Supreme Court for a lifetime. And now we have a very conservative Supreme Court that is using decisions like this to fundamentally change the way things happen in this country. So I'm very concerned about the direction of this country. And I hope that this is a wake-up call, not just for Texans, but the United States of America.
So let me push back. After you spent a month here in Washington, D.C., and you looked at the way politics are, do you really think the people that you met with on either side of the aisle is upset about the issue of abortion, or is it being used as a wedge issue that they know will draw out voters come November? And the same thing with voting rights. Do you think that this is actually about worrying about whether black or brown people vote, or simply a wedge issue that will turn out one base versus the other?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it certainly is a wedge issue to rile up the base from the right when it comes to abortion. And I think that certainly from the Democrat side, this is a do or die situation when it comes to voting. Voting, if the Democrats, in my belief, this is my opinion, if they don't get this federal voting rights legislation passed, then they're going to lose the House and they're going to lose the Senate in the midterm elections, because they're going to be hundreds of thousands of African Americans and millions of African Americans and Hispanics across this country that are going to be disenfranchised with these new voter restrictions, not just in Texas, but you've seen it in Georgia and Arizona and Florida, and there are going to be other states that are going to do the same thing. So I'm very concerned about our democracy, and I believe that it is a wedge issue for both sides, and both sides need to stop playing partisan politics and do what's best for this country. And that is be statesmen, put the people before politics. And I don't see enough of that. The Democrats are certainly doing what they can. It's unfortunate that there was not one single Republican that voted in favor of the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, not one single Republican. Look at in the past, it was overwhelming. It passed 98-0 when the Voting Rights Act was reauthorized in the U.S. Senate. Now you can't find one Republican to support it. So we're going backwards. We're going to a dark day in our country, back to the Jim Crow era. And I'm being hyperbolic, but that is close to what I'm seeing when it comes to these voter restrictions, Jim Crow 2.0. And it is unfortunate that it's become a partisan issue. And voting is such a fundamental right that many of our forefathers, whose shoulders I stand on, died for.
Texas State Rep Ron Reynolds joining us from Austin. I get the feeling we're going to be talking more in the coming days. Mr. Reynolds, thank you very much for being with us. And as you heard the representative say, a major blow to Roe versus Wade. Texas now has the nation's most extreme abortion law, bans abortions after a fetal heartbeat has been detected. That stops procedures after 6 weeks of pregnancy. And a pro-choice group saying many women don't even know they are pregnant at that point. Let's find out the legal side of this from Dr. Laura McNeal. She is our chief legal correspondent. And Dr. Laura, walk us through the details of Governor Abbott's abortion law in Texas. Nothing after 6 weeks, the start of a heartbeat. It seems grossly oversimplified, but what else and who else is affected by this?
Yes, it is oversimplified, and it's one of the strictest, or rather the strictest abortion law in America. And so it's quite a contrast from what we see in other states. But what makes this Texas law even more unique is it deputizes its citizens and says, you know what, if you obeyed or aid in any way, if you assist anyone in getting an abortion after that 6 weeks in the state of Texas, you're going to be held civilly liable. So what do I mean by that? Well, essentially, you can be sued by another citizen for $10,000. That's how much you'll have to pay if that individual wins, plus their attorney fees. So imagine if you're an Uber driver, a Lyft driver, driving someone to an abortion clinic after that 6-week window, you're liable. What if you're a mother that says, you know what, my college student isn't ready to be a mom, and you financially assist your daughter in the procedure? You also are potentially civilly liable for $10,000. And so this is one of those laws that affects not just the women, and again, in the state of Texas, this is 85% of the abortion patients, but also anyone that helps or aids and abets in any way.
Dr. Laura, the Supreme Court didn't do away with voting rights legislation. It simply allowed those legislative issues to be gutted. Are we seeing the same thing happen now with regards to Roe v. Wade? In other words, the court will leave it intact as the law of the land, but every plank of Roe v. Wade will be done away with?
You know, that's the question of the day, and it's interesting because it's very similar to what we see happening with voting rights laws. The Supreme Court kind of taking a hands-off approach and allowing states to make the decision. But what I think is important to note that I don't think it's sealed yet in terms of the fate of Roe versus Wade. Really what's going to be the deciding fate is when the Supreme Court hears that Mississippi abortion rights case, and that is a case challenging the constitutionality of a Mississippi law that bans abortions at 15 weeks. That is going to be, as we say, the law of the land, and then we will know truly whether or not Roe versus Wade is going to be overturned.
Dr. Laura, someone brought this up earlier this morning. Can a woman living in Texas consult and then cross state lines to carry out an abortion?
You know, interestingly enough, if you look at the letter of the law, the abortion procedure has to be committed in the state of Texas. The aiding and abetting needs to be committed in the state of Texas. So if I call a friend, and again, just a hypothetical, in Texas and say, hey, I found this clinic, I'm going to wire you the money, that does not, the Texas law doesn't apply to me because I'm outside of their boundaries. One thing about state laws, they only apply to people within their state. We call it in law sovereignty, their boundaries. So it doesn't extend outside the state of Texas.
Based on what the Supreme Court didn't do, are you now concerned that Roe v. Wade will be overturned and soon?
You know what, I am, and the reason why is I think it's very likely it will be overturned simply because if you look at the makeup of the court, we have to remember that President Trump, or rather former President Trump, he appointed 3 very conservative judges to the court. Justice Kavanaugh has been very vocal in his anti-abortion stance, and so if you look at the makeup of the court, I honestly don't think the votes are there. Again, we'll know very soon this fall when the court hears that Mississippi challenge to their abortion law, but it doesn't look good for people that are pro-life.
Dr. Laura, one final question, which is, as we look at the courts, there's always an assumption that just because somebody like Kavanaugh or somebody like Gorsuch or somebody like Amy Coney Barrett says that they are against abortion, that they are really ideologically involved in this. In other words, they have an emotional stake. Do you believe that the justices in this case are emotionally involved in this, or is this just like Congress now, where the money flows into the court via one way or another way, and they influence decisions that should be neutral?
You know, Del, I think that there is an emotional connection. The reality is justices are human just like you and I, and there's a lot of research that talks about the personability, or rather the personal lens in which justices view these decisions. They're not immune from having value systems that may conflict with the current law. And so I think, yes, a lot of these justices, this is personal for them. They're supposed to be neutral. They're supposed to just apply the letter of the law. But with a topic this sensitive, this tied to a lot of their religious beliefs, I think we would be amiss to think that they're not influenced in any way by their own personal value system when they do view this type of situation or cases with something as sensitive as abortion rights.
Imagine those scales out in front of the Supreme Court in which justice is not blind. BNC's Dr. Laura McNeal. Dr. Laura, as always, thank you very much.